It only lasted 2 weeks before I went to prison, but it was a time that we had been apart for 8.5 months, and we just needed that time to reconnect and get ready for what was coming, because the hardest part was yet to come.
I really thought God freed me from it at that time. I thought I was free from that, but God knew that I wasn't. He knew that He was going to need to get that root out of me.
Was it substance abuse or was it, okay.
Yeah, it was substance abuse.
Yeah.
It was pills. And as the addiction grew, the need for more medication grew. I mean, gosh, I could have gone to jail, Eric.
I mean, at one point right before she quit, I got to where I was taking, she didn't know this, that I would take medication out of her purse and I would flush it down the toilet.
What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. Perhaps you've heard this quote given at weddings just before the bride and groom kiss, and then sprint down the church aisle, catapulting them into a supposedly happily ever after scenario. However, when you throw lies, deceit, and betrayal into that scenario, the odds of survival dwindle to almost nothing. Now, what if we add a prison sentence, a drug addiction into that recipe? Most would say this is a recipe for disaster and a complete failure of a marriage. Can God repair this kind of damage? Can two people that are committed to God's best in their life beat the odds? Can God bring healing, forgiveness, and love back into their relationship? These are the topics that I want to discuss today with our returning guests. Hey, if you haven't listened to the first part of their story, please go back and listen to the last episode to hear Jeff and Aimee's complete life change story. Previously on episode 32.
So I got into that. I kept it quiet. I didn't say anything. You know, you can go in there, you can exchange pictures with people, you can talk with people, and it's just, it'll take you farther than you want to go. I'd say, God, please take this away. Take it away. I don't want to do it anymore.
One early January morning, 5:30, the police were banging on my front door. And I look out the window, there were these police cars there in my yard, and I thought, oh my gosh, something is really wrong in the neighborhood. What is happening? So I come downstairs, I open the door, and the policemen say, is this where Jeff lives? And I said, yes, but I think you have the wrong Jeff. They said, no, ma'am, we don't. And they gave the address, and they said, we have a search warrant for your home. You know, Pastor Scott, I have a question for you. He said, okay. And I said, do I have biblical grounds for divorce? I want to know if I have biblical grounds for divorce. His answer was, Aimee, yes, you do have biblical grounds for divorce, but that is not God's plan. God's plan is forgiveness. I did not want to hear that. I did not know how to do that, but I was willing to do what God wanted me to do as I had given Him my life, just a few months earlier.
And now the rest of Jeff and Aimee's story. So Aimee, Jeff has been caught in some unhealthy and illegal online relationships. He is headed to jail first and then to prison. This alone would shake the foundations of any marriage. Just a few months before this incident, you totally gave your life to Christ. But just because you have given your life to Jesus doesn't mean that you won't have difficulties and burdens. And this was a big one. It leads you down a dark path. Tell us about that. So
addiction has been a thing in my family for, generations back. You can trace it. And I had a problem with addiction earlier on in our marriage as a nurse, but I kept it hidden. But then it did get revealed. Jeff was there for me. We worked through it. We were in church at that time, and I really thought God freed me from it at that time. I thought I was free from that. But God knew that I wasn't. He knew that He was going to need to get that root out of me. So being so broken, being I was full of anxiety. I was full of so many emotions. So I did go to the doctor and said, I need some medicine to help cope here. And so I started taking some medicine at that time. I did not start abusing it then. I couldn't, especially after Jeff was gone and it was just me. I had to keep things going at home, and I had never done that. Jeff had always taken care of everything. So that was a learning curve. But during that time, yes, I took some pills to numb.
Right. Mm-hmm. Numb the pain.
Numb the pain.
Medication.
Numb the pain.
Yeah.
But I also had a very stressful job, a very important job as an oncology nurse. And again, just keeping the home together while he was away. And so the addiction was at bay at that time. It did rear its head very ugly later on after Jeff got home.
Yeah. So feel free to say no to this question, but was it substance abuse or was it, okay.
Yeah,
So,
it was substance abuse.
Yeah.
It was pills.
Yeah. Okay. And so whenever you were on medication for, you said, hey, I need some help with this. So you said it reared its head again. Was that during the process of him going into trial, or was this after he was already been incarcerated, or both?
Well, it was both. I just had to keep it contained, and I could not go overboard. I wasn't able to just over medicate and lose it. I had to function, and so I did use the medicine to help me along the way while he was gone. But after he got home, it was even more hard. I didn't think it would be. Neither one of us did, but we had a lot of obstacles to go through. And then, when you're in survival mode, because that's what I was in while he was away, I was just in survival mode. Really, it's hard for healing to take place. Now, I want to say here, though, that this is where God began mending our hearts together, was during his time as starting in jail, because our only communication could be a little 15-minute visit once a week through a window on a phone, through a camera. And then it was writing letters. And so that's where all of this new kind of communication and sharing our hearts came in. And we did that throughout. And so God was mending our hearts. At prison visits, you sit there for 4 hours, and that's a lot of time to talk.
Yeah.
But when you're going through something like that, Eric, and it's just you and another person, only you guys really know what it's like. And so you're leaning on each other too. You're leaning on the Lord, and you're leaning on each other. And so it did bring us close.
Wow. So Jeff, I want to come over to you now. So let's talk about, what was it like first time in jail? How was it going into jail? I mean, that must have been a terrible experience. Describe that to me, for someone who's never been in jail before. What was that like?
It was definitely an eye-opener. For offenders, you're in different pods than regular inmates. So, and I didn't know, it's all, never been to jail before in my life. Walk in, it's hard to comprehend, I think, the noise. There's so much noise, so much yelling, so much screaming. It's 24/7. It never stops. It's the yelling and the screaming in jail is worse than prison because it never shuts down. Things that we take for granted in the real world about not worrying about somebody doing something to you will definitely come true in jail. And I don't know how, I hadn't been there very long, and the guy was killed.
Did you witness that, or was just someone that you knew?
It was in the next pod to us.
Okay.
And you could hear them when they broke everything in and everything that was going on, because, see, the walls are so thin, and that's another thing. You have these different pods, and these pods are beating on the wall, hollering and screaming, and this pod over here is doing the same thing. And when I first went in, I slept on the floor for 4 months because there wasn't a bed. It was so overcrowded.
Wow. So you were in the same facility, but just different pods? Is that how
yes.
it works? Okay.
That's correct.
And how long were you in that facility?
8.5 months.
8.5 months.
That was jail. The prisons were full.
Okay.
So that's why I stayed in jail for so long. I knew God was speaking to me. The Holy Spirit was really moving, and several things had happened in jail, and it was real intense. And I mean, I'd wake up, I'd stay up all night just praying and pray during the night and Then a pastor friend of mine, Steve, come by and he said, Jeff, you need to just shut up and be still. He said, be still. I said, okay. Well, Valentine's Day had always been a very special day for me because I would go all out on Valentine's Day for Amy. I had our whole marriage, and little did I know that I would be spending Valentine's Day with her. I get a call over the intercom, Sanders, report to the front. So I come to the front of the pod, grab your stuff. And they don't tell you anything, escort me to the front, and you need to go to this window. My lawyer's over there, and he said, hey, you're going to go home. He said, I can't tell you how long. I don't know. But you're going to go home. Get out here, go home, don't talk to anybody. You don't know nothing. Next call you get will be when you go to prison. And so I called Amy, and she couldn't get me. She couldn't come and get me. I called a friend of mine. He said, I'll be right there. And he loaded me up, took me home on Valentine's Day. And it was a time that God needed us. It only lasted 2 weeks before I went to prison. But it was a time that we had been apart for 8.5 months. And we just needed that time to reconnect and get ready for what was coming, because the hardest part was yet to come. And he gave me 2 weeks with Amy, and we made the best of it. We drew close to the Lord. I mean, I knew on Monday when I was leaving, my life group class come over, all the guys laid hands on me and prayed. So I knew I wouldn't see them again. Then that Monday, my best friend Joe loads me up, takes me to the jail, and drops me off.
So how long was Jeff actually in prison?
It seems like maybe you were in prison for 1.5 years or something like that.
So you were actually only incarcerated in prison for about 1.5 years,
Yes.
give or take a few months.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So 1.5 years in prison. Can you tell me which prison that you were in? Was it here in Arkansas? Or
It was here in Arkansas.
He was in Grimes in Newport, Arkansas, and that's about 4 hours away.
Okay. And so, Amy, did you go and visit him while he was in prison during that 1.5 years time or not?
Mm-hmm, I did. Yeah. And once again, God provided for me. Little did I know, a lady from our church knew a lady who was married to someone in prison there at Grimes, and this wasn't just an ordinary guy. His name was Larry Ashley, and Larry actually started a program called the PALS program in the prison systems, which is a faith-based organization. They have their own pod. You're a little more protected. You can talk and learn about Jesus. You can grow your relationship. And so Diana and I and Jeff and Larry all this time, they didn't know each other yet, but we were praying that Jeff would end up at Grimes, and he did.
Oh,
and
wow.
And then he ended up with Larry. So the very first time that I went to a prison to visit my husband, God gave me someone to go right there before me. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's amazing. So how often did you go visit during that? I mean, did you go every month, or how often did you go?
I went as much as my fatigue level and energy level could afford. I think I went once a month for sure. Sometimes I would go twice a month, but once a month for sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like there at Grimes? Were you also in a pod there, or were you actually in a cell with someone else, or just how what was it like in prison?
You just have to get with the right folks. Now, with my charge, there's automatic target on my back.
Right.
And they know what your charge is before you get there. Prison is, I've always told Amy that we need to write a book. And I think if we ever wrote a book that, the name of the book would be To Hell and Back. What we see on the news that we think is totally bizarre and insane is what goes on in prison day in and day out. Every single day. God showed me in prison, he humbled me, but also he was preparing me for what I was going to have to deal with out of prison. And a lot of that was going to be forgiveness. A lot of that was going to have to be loving my wife like I've never loved her. Love her for who she is, not what I want her to be. But what it done, it drew me and Amy so close. Even in prison, we started doing Bible studies together. And so she would send me the book. We would pray about it till we come up with a book. And so we would read the same chapter, and then I'd call her and we would discuss the chapter and, what do you think God's saying to us? What is he saying to you? And we would pray, and we're writing letters to each other, just pouring our hearts out. I mean, it's great. Doing Bible studies together. So, it's a long growing process, and that was just the start of the process.
So let me switch over to Amy. Amy, what was the most difficult thing for you during that 1.5-year time period before he came back? What was the things that you were struggling with? Now, you had mentioned earlier, the addiction rearing its head again. Was that something that happened while he was in prison as well? And if it did, I mean, were you were using it, I guess, as a medication? It was part of addiction. Was that a secret that you were keeping, or was there someone that you were, telling that to?
No, it was a secret that I was keeping. I mean, I think that Jeff had an idea. He probably did, just because of my past before that, depending on medication instead of letting God do it all. But so yeah, I was taking medicine in the evenings at home. I would take it before I would go into a prison visit because, going into the prison was just something that I don't ever want to have to do again. Just it's the loud doors clanging behind you when you go in. I mean, that kind of is like you see on TV. I mean, here I am. I'm thinking, okay, I'm the wife. I'm not the prisoner, but they don't care. The guards are just, unfortunately, they're just cold to their job. They see a lot of stuff, I'm sure, but so it was hard for me even to go visit Jeff. It was traumatic. The whole thing was traumatic, and so I was medicating to numb, because even though we were writing letters and things and we were connecting, underneath all of that was still the hurt and the betrayal and the just raw wounds, and those were not getting to heal yet because I was numbing.
So at what point did you get into recovery? Because you've told me that before. So did that happen while he was in jail, or did that happen when he came out?
Well, that happened when he came out, but it did not happen on my own because, like Jeff was in his addiction, in my addiction, I hated it. I didn't like it. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. So God knew what it was going to take. And Jeff had been home for 2 years, and but since he was home, then I was able to medicate even more. And again, as things would happen with parole, he would be put back in jail and look like he was going to have to go back to prison for something that he had been honest about, and it didn't get communicated, and it just was a mess. I would go deeper each time. It was just so traumatic. And then you have police coming into your house whenever they want to. I was always scared they were going to come and get him for no reason. And so I was really heavily medicating. And so one day I was at work at my job. Being a nurse, I was able to take things into my own hands, and I take this all on myself. So I was able to call in prescriptions for myself, and I did that. And as the addiction grew, the need for more medication grew. God was still very gracious to me, though, in that there were not ever any charges pressed. Gosh, I could have gone to jail, Eric, and God in his grace, did not allow that, but he knew that taking away my nursing license would do it. And so I got fired from my job where I had been for 12 years, a very good job. And it just was taken away. But that's okay. The day I went into, when they called me in and they told me that I had been caught. I mean, I was so thankful. I was actually in a Jonah Bible study, and the day before, I knew something was going to happen. I knew because it had said God disciplines those that He loves, and so the next day when they called me in, I knew, and I told them that. And I said, "Well, I can know that I'm a child of God because He disciplines those that He loves." So anyway, looked into my own recovery. Then I got into some intense outpatient recovery. I was able to stop the medication cold turkey, and that is a miracle. That does not happen. And so then from that point on, I could get honest about my struggles. Jeff was dealing with everything that he had to, and so we were both taking ownership for our issues. And that's when I got into CR and a step study, because the nursing board required that if I wanted to try to get my license back. So here I thought, well, I'm going to check a box. I'm going to go through this 12-step program and just be done with it and turn my paper in. And God used it to go so much deeper in my life, not just addiction. He went into healing my past hurts, healing my able to see my past through my family. God has since then He's restored everything. See, through Jeff staying with me in my problem, in my addiction, and taking care of me when I was at my lowest, that brought my family along a little more and allowed them to see, hey, he's not so bad after all. My dad had already forgiven Jeff, but it gave my parents the reason to say, yeah, Jeff is different. He's not the same. Aimee knows what she's talking about. And so just the whole healing that came in there. And then from that time forward, God could take Aimee and Jeff as one with Him and move us forward, healing as we went. So that's what He did.
So was there a discovery time for him for your addiction? When was it that he found out that you were medicating again? Was that after he had gotten out? Did you still keep that after he got out? You said you were medicating more. Did he know about it? Or, did you guys have a discussion? How did that happen?
Unfortunately, he could just tell. He just knew. But
did you ever say anything to her about it or not?
So sometimes it's best just to keep your mouth shut. Did I know? Yeah, I could call her from prison and her speech was slurred, and, I knew it was going on. And at one point right before she quit, I got to where I was taking, she didn't know this, that I would take medication out of her purse and I would flush it down the toilet when she would go into more or less pass out. Then I would go downstairs and I'd get a lot of the medication and I'd flush it down the toilet. Well, what I didn't realize was that was making her write more prescriptions sooner.
Right. So let me ask you, Aimee, then, so was it when you got caught that you finally realized, you said, hey, I've got a problem and I need some help? Is that when that happened?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to stop. I didn't, I knew it was getting out of control and it wasn't going to be good, but I couldn't stop. It was through that first step study where I realized, okay, this is life-changing because life goes on, and there will continue to be hard things. This is not the only hard thing, but Jesus will be my answer. He will be enough, and he will be sufficient.
Mm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So what did you discover in that process? Did you discover any character defects about yourself that was causing you to was it low self-esteem? Was it?
Oh, gosh. Oh, sure. It was perfectionism. It was the people pleaser in me. It was seeking approval from others. Fear of rejection is a huge one. Just basically not feeling like I would be enough. And, Eric, the other thing I did is I found my identity in my job. My identity was wrapped up in Aimee, RN, oncology nurse, and being a nurse. And so my identity, that's where I got my good feels from. And as far as, my identity, God had to take that away too, because that's not my identity. My identity is Jesus Christ and who He is, because it's not about Aimee. It's about Him. And he now lives in me. And what a gift he gave me through that by even revealing that, where I was finding my identity.
Any last words before we wrap up?
This is the first time we have shared our story publicly ever.
And thank you for doing that, by the way.
Yes, well, thank you for the opportunity, because this is even
Amen.
bringing more freedom and more healing to us, to hopefully open up doors to minister to other people, to let them know that you are not alone as you feel right now in whatever it is you're going through. But especially if you're in a marriage and there's been something like has happened to us, the one thing that I would have just loved to have had would be another woman to ask questions like, what do I do here? What is going to happen when this happens? And that kind of thing. And so we just want to be available and be there as a soundboard, be there as a prayer partner. And, God he gave us some opportunity here and there with a few other couples. And so we've been able to do that. It's so funny because in this new church we're in our life group, people have just been kind of sharing testimonies the last month and a half, and that, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And that just kept pricking my heart, and like, honey, I think we need to share our testimony but oh my gosh, we don't know these people. We don't know, what if this, what if that, and letting some fear kind of hold us back. And then just out of the blue, in our eyes, but not in God's eyes, this opportunity comes up, and God is like, this is what I want you all to do. And then just giving us the peace and the confidence in him to do it. Jeff and I putting God first in our own individual life and then in our marriage, because that 3-cord strand, it cannot easily be broken.
Jeff and Aimee, thanks so much for sharing the rest of your life change story with us. If you are listening today and you have really been moved by Jeff and Aimee's story and you want to reach out to them, you can go to www.ifnothingchanges.net. Go to the top left-hand corner of the screen and message me. Make sure that you leave your email address and or your phone number, and I will pass that on to them. Hey, if you feel that there is no hope for your marriage, maybe you feel that there are just too many hurts, too many lies, and too many obstacles to overcome. That's a lie. When the disciples asked Jesus how something could be done, Jesus said, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Positive change and healing are possible. But if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time.